Welcome to another episode of JTV in this brave new world that we're living in, where we're ending up doing so many of our interviews and our content virtually online, having conversation with people. But in a sense, I'm kind of happy that we at least have the opportunity to do these things. And I think maybe there are some interviews and discussions that I think might not have been had with people, because I would have probably preferred to just only do it when I'm in person and film it in person. And the fact that everyone's now doing video conferencing for discussions, it's making this more normal and actually creating some opportunities to have some conversations with some people that I really want to speak to. And I can't think of anyone that I'm more excited to be speaking to right now than Rabbi David Fohrman, who Rabbi, I just want to, first of all, welcome to the program and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. It's great to be here with you.
And you're currently in America right now on the East Coast.
That's
but
correct.
I just want to first of all take this moment just to express my gratitude and appreciation to you for, you have a fantastic online website called Aleph Beta, as well as have written some phenomenal books that really delve into understanding and questioning, the narratives within the Torah, within key Jewish stories, and you have so deeply enhanced my appreciation and understanding of Torah. And I just want to first just take this opportunity just to thank you so much for really enhancing my Jewish spiritual life understanding journey. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, and it means a lot to hear you say that, and to be able to contribute that kind of understanding to folks out there. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here again.
Well, really, I mean every word that I say, and I strongly encourage you, if you haven't been on the website yet, check out alephbeta.org. It is a phenomenal website. And so the first thing I want to ask...
An easy way to remember it, by the way, for an easy way to get there is ab.video, but just type that into your browser. Folks have a hard time sometimes with Aleph Beta, can't figure out if it's Aleph Beta, Alpha Beta, right? So ab.video is just an easy way to get there.
ab.video, okay, fantastic. And there's very few channels that I would say if you had to pick between watching JTV or something else, watch something else. But I would say that with Aleph Beta, it's so brilliant. So I'm asking this to really every guest that I have on the program, which is that, the world has really changed a lot in the past few weeks. And I want to know, as a Jewish educator and someone who has a lot of profound things to say and thinks in a very profound way, what is at the forefront of your mind right now?
Let's see. First of all, just in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It would be nice to say that at the forefront of my mind is all sorts of wonderful philosophical speculations and great wisdom insights, but I am in the center of things. New York is right in the middle of the East Coast. Has been hit pretty hard by the coronavirus. Nassau County has been hit doubly as hard as Manhattan, which is where I am. The forefront of my mind is really just keeping our family safe, and the vulnerable people in my family, especially. So that's the honest truth.
So then what's at the back of your mind?
In the back of my mind. The other things in my mind are, well, first of all, you mentioned that the world has changed so much. I think that that's kind of a humbling thing. I remember reading a bit of The Black Swan. The Black Swan has, I think, entered the vernacular, but it was coined. I don't know if it was coined by the author of The Black Swan, but basically the Black Swan event, of course, is that every once in a while there is a black swan, and it strikes people as a remarkable, unprecedented thing, but it's just part of reality. Nothing to me is more chilling than the Bill Gates interview from 2015, where I don't know if you've seen it, Ollie, but where he talks
the TED
about
speech.
A pandemic of a coronavirus being essentially 50-50 odds in his lifetime, and for a mere $10 billion, which feels like pocket change now for the world economy, the world could be prepared for that, but instead we're investing in yesterday's threats. which is in yesterday's threats, which is the the threat of nuclear Armageddon, which is always out there, but it's yesterday's threat, and I think that it's always easier to be reactive than to be proactive. I think we see that in governmental responses, certainly in America and in England, where you and I live. I think Israel has been one of the most proactive countries in dealing with this, and I give the government there a lot of respect for what it is that they're doing and how they're handling it, together with the Mossad. But I think that one of the things that people need to do in order to be able to maintain a proactive response is not to succumb to the black swan illusion, which is to say that the consciousness that life can change dramatically is not something that comes easily to us. We are lulled into a certain kind of complacency that, because things have always gone a certain way, they will. And I think, no one could imagine the kind of world we're living in. If you could take a snapshot of any aspect of the world, empty airports, gyms that are closed, economies that are closed, people not walking in the streets, empty plazas, right? All of that would have seemed, so strange. And yet, I think that a key sort of basis point that we need to be able to get to respond proactively is to not take our current reality for granted, and not to take the things that we have for granted, and to understand that it all can change quickly. So to me, that's kind of one of the things that's in the forefront of my mind, which is appreciating, and that goes for a lot of things. I think spiritually, there's a lot of aspects of that too, right? Which is that it's always human nature to take what you have for granted and then to wonder about something else. But if you think about the kinds of things that we still have that we take for granted, family, the family that we're quarantining with, those social bonds are so important and can't be taken for granted. Health, to the extent that we still have it, can't be taken for granted. Shelter, food, I mean, just the basics, right, are things to rejoice in. And I think a kind of getting back to basics and rejoicing in those basics there's something sweet about that, about not taking that for granted. I think in my own experience, the experience of letting go of household help and coming together as a family and just navigating the new normal and disinfecting groceries and keeping a house up and caring for those who are in other places, and just banding together as a family to help others and help ourselves is also not something to be taken for granted. There's a certain kind of sweetness in those interpersonal bonds of just simply getting back to basics that's wonderful. And I think anybody this year, from your Jewish listeners or non-Jews who celebrate a Seder and have a very different Seder, a much more basic Seder on plastic, but with just family around and no guests. And on the one hand, you can decry that as what a great tragedy, but it's sweet and it's back to basics. And I think a lot of people had the best Seder they've ever had in years in being able to just cut away anything extraneous and be able to revel and rejoice in the little things. So those are some of the thoughts in the back of my mind.
One thing my brother actually mentioned to me was that he said it feels slightly, I wouldn't say eerie, but there were a lot of people that sadly were alone during their Seder meals because of the current situation. And I think it's perhaps too. It felt a little bit tenuous, but he said it is quite interesting that you have in the Torah itself narrative people that can't celebrate Passover or give the Passover offering, the Korban Pesach, because they had some kind of disease and it was a contagious disease, and therefore they had to be outside the camp. I wondered if you just saw any. Have you thought about that kind of parallel at all? Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. You're talking about Pesach Sheni and the people who are Tmei L'Nefesh Adam, people who have been in contact with a dead person and therefore are not in position to celebrate Passover at its normal time. It's pushed off by a month, and so yeah, that is kind of interesting, and it feels like sometimes Passover comes at an inopportune time, and there's a chance to make it up. At least in the Torah, there's this notion of Pesach Sheni, a month later, the ability to offer a replacement Korban Pesach. For some of us, in the thick of things, it would have been nice to have an extra month. So yes, I guess there's some thoughts of that. But as for folks celebrating Seder alone, that was, my mom was one of them. The family banded together and created a special Haggadah for her with pictures and little commentary and notes. And I think that was nice. Yeah, so that's tough. But again, that too is something which the Gemara, the Talmud anticipates, talks about what it's like. The Talmud specifically addresses somebody running a Seder alone and says that you ask yourself the 4 questions and you keep up the Socratic question and answer kind of dialogue yourself. And, there's something I think interesting and meditative about that. I remember I got a chance to work with Natan Sharansky a few years back. And, I always marveled at his strength, of course, for being able to persevere in isolation in the Gulag for many years. And he did it, through certain meditative techniques, playing chess with himself. And if you think about the notion of playing chess with yourself, it means being able to occupy the white side and then transfer to the black side, and then transfer to the white side and transfer to the black side. And that sort of meditative aspect of being able to occupy more than one space in your mind, to be able to, is might be a kind of key out of the torture of isolation. If you think about what the Gemara talks about, is that you ask yourself questions. It's very similar to playing chess with yourself. It's occupying the other side of a debate, right? Where you can be the questioner and then be the answerer and then be the questioner. And maybe the reason why that's a key out of isolation is because, one of the sad foibles of human nature is that we get stuck in our own perspective. And we lounge into a certain kind of narcissistic self-indulgence where we see things the way we've always seen them before. We retreat into our little bubble. If we watch CNBC or we watch Fox News or whatever it is we watch, and we have our view, and that's the way we see things. And we aren't really so open to an outside view. We're willing to parry it, but we're not really willing to listen. We're not really willing to jump over to the other side of the fence and occupy that other vision and argue for it. And maybe that works, and we can get by in normal life when we have contact with other people. So we can sort of get by, and others to some extent provide a little bit of a counterpoint for us. But maybe there's something meaningful about what the rabbis say, that when you're alone, the way you respond to being alone is you ask yourself questions and then you give the answers, and you ask yourself questions and then you give the answers. Or as Sharansky would say, you play chess with yourself. And the ultimate victory over being alone is not to simply represent your own view, but to imagine another view and to argue for it, and then to come back to your view and imagine another view. And in that way, maybe there's a kind of victory over isolation.
Do you think it's good to be? It's a sign of someone that's worked on himself, at peace with himself, that they can be comfortable being alone? Or do you think ultimately we are social beings, and we need other people?
I mean, first of all, I do think we're social beings, and I do think we need other people. Interestingly, I think nevertheless, somebody who's alone has to figure out a way to deal with that, right? If society places you, or if circumstances place you in a situation where you're alone, I think we have to compensate by mimicking artificially, uh, mimicking artificially the other person, which is where I'm coming from in the chess analogy, or in the asking yourself questions. There is this theme, in Hasidic thought, and Musar thought talks about hitbodedut, the sort of virtues of being alone. And I think there is a place for being alone in the world. I think that, in other words, the way you phrase that question is, do we need others? And
Well, of course we need others. What I mean,
right?
it's I really
Well, I
phrase it
think
the
the
wrong
question,
way.
what I mean by that is need is a slippery word.
Yeah.
Of course, we do need others in ways, but I think the most powerful way we need others is in a way to reach out to others and to be able to give to them, to be with others and to be able to connect to them, not necessarily for our own needs, but what we can give to them, I think is a powerful therapeutic. It does more for us in a way than does for them. And I think it's one of the deepest ways we need others, ironically, is when we don't really need them, when we're reaching out to them and being able to give to them.
Right.
And one of the most painful things about isolation is not being able to do that. I mean, I even know my mom, who's isolated now. I went to visit her last night, and my mom has been, making soup for our family, and she put some soup pots out on the deck chairs and retreated back into her house. And I went and got from the deck chairs, and to her, that's very powerful, right? To be able to give to another family is a way to connect. So I think it's one of the deepest ways we connect is by being able to give.
I think where I was coming from was that I've heard people say, and self-help people say, if you're not comfortable being just with yourself and with your thoughts, maybe not eternally, but from time to time, then you need to, there's something not quite in balance with you.
Yeah, you were breaking up there. I didn't catch the rest of that sentence. Certainly, I think that's right. I think that's true. I mean, I think, Eric Fromm talks about this, where he talks about, the notion of love. And he says that if you're in a needy state where you need others to fill holes inside your own sense of self, you aren't really capable of love. And love begins with a certain kind of self-sufficiency. And that self-sufficiency, one way to express it is the ability to be alone and be okay with it. And then there's another level, which is, now that I can be alone, I can reach out to others and have the joy of connection with them by reaching out from a place, ironically, where I'm okay being alone, and yet there's something I can give to you by reaching out. But certainly the notion of being okay being alone is not something to take for granted. I myself struggle with it. I find myself to be a news junkie sometimes, and with the ubiquity of a smartphone, the ability to listen to a podcast or to check Twitter becomes addictive at a certain point. And I wonder whether a lot of that is, in a deep kind of way, coming with a discomfort of being alone, right? Why do you have to always listen to a podcast? Why do you have to always check Twitter if you find yourself alone for a few minutes? And right, because it feels uncomfortable to just be on a long walk with your thoughts with no other distractions. But I agree with you that is a needed salve for our lives, and we have to cultivate that ability.
Absolutely.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.